This is definitely the top hit of July. Fans of cute male characters shouldn't miss it. The protagonist, Tokiyuki Hojo, is a young lord of the Kamakura shogunate. Inept at both literary and martial arts, his only skill is escaping from his servants. While his elder half-brother practices swordsmanship, he runs away. Even as the shogunate's general Ashikaga prepares to march, he is still fleeing. Despite evading many, he is eventually caught by Ashikaga. Ashikaga looks at him fondly, telling him he is about to campaign in Kyoto to suppress the turmoil caused by Godigo and others. Tokiyuki is chosen as his future lord, hoping he will witness his loyalty to the Hojo clan. Tokiyuki relies heavily on the general. After Ashikaga leaves, Tokiyuki's childhood friend Kyoko approaches, reminding him there's no need to fear Ashikaga, as he is the heir to the shogunate and Ashikaga's future master. She, his future wife, then attempts to kiss him forcefully. Just then, the two servants catch up, and Tokiyuki quickly flees. Kyoko's father, disappointed, thinks Tokiyuki won't amount to much, likely to be just a puppet like his father. Kyoko doesn't mind, as long as she enjoys wealth and status, and marrying the gentle and handsome Tokiyuki is no loss. The servants can't find Tokiyuki anywhere, who is sitting on the rooftop watching them leave, unconcerned about being called incompetent. His elder brother brings him some buns, none in their family wanting to be the lord. Their father is sickly and lacks ambition, and although his brother is a legitimate son, he has no desire for power. As the true heir, Tokiyuki can't avoid responsibilities and spends his days playing hide-and-seek with his servants. This time, the servants smartly flank him. Tokiyuki hands his puppy to his brother and leaps down, jumping to an opposite roof. The clumsy servants dare not follow, and Tokiyuki swings from the eaves, jumps through an open window, dashes through the women's courtyard, and joyously runs out to the street, his face unable to hide his joy of freedom. People on the street aren't surprised, smiling as he runs away again. Finally, Tokiyuki reaches the outskirts, climbing a tree overlooking Kamakura. He loves this land and the peaceful lives of its people, desiring no honor or status, just to live in this town. Even as a puppet, laziness or cowardice doesn't bother him. Suddenly a bell rings, and a beautiful girl appears below the tree, saying that Tokiyuki is not lazy or cowardly, but harbors a dormant monster inside, as her father said. The next moment, a large face appears behind Tokiyuki, startling him. He introduced himself as Yorishige Suwa, a priest from Shinano province. True to his role, he spoke in a manic and rambling manner. Right away, he deluged Tokiyuki with talk, claiming he was tasked with praying to the heavens to protect Kamakura from enemies, and he had just completed his prayers. He came to report to Tokiyuki's father. The girl below was his daughter, Shizuku, skilled in secret techniques and clerical work, assisting her father. Tokiyuki only wanted to know why this man knew he would climb the tree. Unexpectedly, Shizuku also spoke in a rambling manner, saying her father could foresee the future through divine power. To prove his divine power, Suwa scrutinized Tokiyuki, but became confused. Tokiyuki grew more distrustful of him. However, Suwa claimed that in 2 years, Tokiyuki would become a groundbreaking hero and lead a major battle, even altering the nation's future. Tokiyuki didn't pay attention and quietly retreated, quickly fleeing. He clearly regarded Suwa as a charlatan. Yet his sincere eyes lingered in Tokiyuki's mind, giving him a real impulse to believe in his potential as a hero. Still, Tokiyuki remained skeptical and joked about it with his brother, who thought there might be some truth in Suwa's words. Tokiyuki was different from the rest of his family. Under certain conditions, he could indeed become a hero. Accidentally, he kicked a ball too high, falling from the rooftop. The next second, that ball turned into a human head. This was outside Kyoto, where Ashikaga was fervently motivating his soldiers to annihilate the rebels. The soldiers were fired up, yet the next second, one of them had his head brutally chopped off by a comrade, as Ashikaga had never intended to quell the rebellion. He had colluded with Godigo, and now, with the Kyoto shogunate forces crushed, Ashikaga's Nida army grew instantly powerful and turned to march on Kamakura. The situation reversed dramatically. The two servants who had been chasing Tokiyuki daily were killed by stray arrows. Kyoko's father committed suicide, and Kyoko herself was violated by enemies and brutally killed. The peaceful and happy Kamakura instantly turned into hell, with fires burning everywhere, destroying happiness and tranquility, leaving only sin. Amidst the flames, Ashikaga indulged in fantasies about his great endeavor. Tokiyuki's father and over 800 of his men committed ritual suicide. The only survivor was Tokiyuki. It was May 1333. The Kamakura shogunate was declared extinct. Tokiyuki watched the scene in disbelief, but then two figures appeared behind him, the father and daughter. Suwa said Tokiyuki's father had instructed him to help Tokiyuki escape before dying. Suwa would take Tokiyuki to his domain, Shinano Suwa. Tokiyuki let Suwa lead him forward. The skilled escapee no longer wanted to run, but wished to commit ritual suicide like his father. Suwa then asked him, "If you die, what will become of Japan's future?" The three came to the mountain and looked down at the hellish scene below. These were all people Tokiyuki had seen just recently. Now they were either desecrated or had become corpses. Learning that Ashikaga was responsible, Tokiyuki's first reaction was disbelief. Could the gentle Ashikaga he knew really have been fake? Even that last smile before he left? Suwa did not comfort Tokiyuki, but instead encouraged him to rally and seek revenge for everyone, promising his unwavering support. Looking at the scene before him, Tokiyuki didn't believe he had the capacity for revenge. After all, it was an army that had destroyed the entire country in just 24 days. He wished at least to die like a samurai. Suwa agreed with him and pushed Tokiyuki off the edge. Tokiyuki initially let himself fall, but at the last moment, he flipped and landed on his stomach. Suwa then intensified his efforts and shouted from above, "This is the son of Hojo!" The initially confused soldiers immediately surrounded him. Fortunately, Tokiyuki, skilled in evasion, swiftly navigated through the blades and shadows, awakening a desire to survive. After distancing himself from the soldiers, he jumped into Suwa's arms and complained, "What if you had gotten me killed?" Tokiyuki verbally claimed that not dying was a disgrace, but his actions in choosing to save himself were precisely those of a hero in his heart. Suwa calmly carried on with Tokiyuki in his arms, as the arrows in the sky seemed to deliberately avoid them. Suwa praised Tokiyuki, calling him a monster with a survival instinct and a talent for living superior to anyone else. For Ashikaga, who became a hero through killing his master and seizing power, Tokiyuki would be a major problem because the next heir of the Kamakura shogunate, who was best at escaping, was a priority target. If Ashikaga became a hero through slaughter, Tokiyuki would become one through survival. They were heroes with polar opposite destinies. Of course, victory could not be achieved by running and hiding alone. So Suwa would prepare everything for Tokiyuki: allies, military power, and wisdom. All these were predicated on Tokiyuki surviving, gathering strength, and defeating the pursuing demons. Come, the battle to reclaim the world from the demon catcher begins. The three rode the same horse away from Kamakura. Tokiyuki couldn't help but ask Suwa about his motives. Suwa answered without hesitation, "It's all for the loyalty to the Hojo family." Of course, Tokiyuki didn't believe this. The real reason, Suwa said, would be revealed the day Tokiyuki reclaims the land of Uchikura. And since Tokiyuki was saved by Suwa, he demanded Suwa take responsibility. Suwa promised without hesitation to follow him to the ends of hell. As Suwa said, 2 years later, Tokiyuki would shake Japan, and his heroic career was about to begin. This character is definitely the most despicable of the July series. To surrender to the enemy, he even sold his own nephew. Not satisfied with his nephew's beheading, he wanted to capture Tokiyuki as well to secure his own luxury and wealth. On the day Ashikaga attacked Kamakura, Tokiyuki's elder brother had initially escaped. He hid cautiously, but was discovered by his uncle. Knowing his brother was also rescued, the elder brother felt relieved. However, he was spotted by a few soldiers. The uncle comforted him, saying the lower-ranking warriors wouldn't recognize them, and he just needed to distract them briefly before leaving. Tokiyuki's elder brother was initially worried for his uncle, not expecting him to betray him by pointing out his hiding spot to the soldiers. Tokiyuki was haunted by a nightmare where he heard Suwa's voice. Suwa leered at the sleeping young boy, finding him too adorable and wanting to kiss his face. Just in time, Tokiyuki woke up and leaped to the rooftop, confronting Suwa. They had agreed to go to his territory, but they had been hiding in Kamakura for days. Suwa explained that the exit was heavily guarded, and they couldn't leave. Tokiyuki knew he was telling the truth as flags were everywhere, and the warriors who had sworn loyalty to the shogunate had easily betrayed them under Ashikaga's orders. Tokiyuki recalled Ashikaga's past smiles and playfulness, sadly noting how things had changed. Shizuku comforted him, suggesting he disguise himself as a shrine attendant from a burned shrine. But Tokiyuki was concerned with a more pressing issue. He had never heard of anyone seizing power by capturing ghosts without the strength for a direct confrontation. Suwa then reassured him, claiming he had seen the moment Tokiyuki would become a hero and just needed to keep his composure. If bored, they could play Sugoroku together. Tokiyuki was speechless, seeing Suwa as unreliable, so he ran out to the ruins where he overheard two people discussing his brother's execution. Shocked and disbelieving, he almost exposed himself in a rash confrontation, but was saved by Suwa and Shizuku, who explained the situation. The two casually revealed how Tokiyuki's brother was betrayed by his own uncle, a notoriously vile warlord in Japanese history. Hearing of his brother's public execution, Tokiyuki felt nauseous. He wondered how their once joyful lives had turned so grim so quickly. Ashikaga betrayed them, the warriors betrayed them, and now even his uncle had betrayed them. Tokiyuki was left wondering who he could still trust, lying on the ground crying heartbreakingly. Unwilling to see the young Tokiyuki cry, Suwa immediately slid under him, attempting to calm him down with his holy light, asking, "Can't you just let him cry properly?" After getting up, Suwa began using his broken divine power to foresee the future, but all he saw were abstract things, like how the enemy forces were too many to handle easily. Tokiyuki, however, was more concerned about where his uncle was. Suwa turned to see Tokiyuki's determined face and extended his hand. As soon as Tokiyuki grabbed it, Suwa pulled him to run quickly, urging Tokiyuki to avenge his brother as the first step to seizing power. Meanwhile, Tokiyuki's uncle did not receive the treatment he desired and was driven away by Ashikaga, likely because he had only betrayed a concubine's son, seen as of little value. If he wanted to move forward in life, he realized he must also deliver Tokiyuki's head. His monologue was witnessed by the trio, confirming his vile nature. Suwa told Tokiyuki that one sure way to win against ghosts is to understand the opponent first. Now that they knew their enemy, they could return to strategize. But Tokiyuki still lacked confidence, having focused on fleeing rather than training in combat from a young age. Suwa didn't expect him to seek revenge alone, and introduced him to two friends, who, along with Shizuku, were playing a strange game of Sugoroku, which Tokiyuki couldn't understand. The young boy, Kojiru, clearly a samurai, and the slightly older girl, Ayako, children of a family serving the Suwa, introduced themselves to Tokiyuki. They both agreed to assist Tokiyuki in his quest against his uncle. Despite knowing that the Hojo clan had been annihilated, neither child expressed dissatisfaction. Ayako found Tokiyuki cute, and Kojiru was determined to protect their young lord. Days later, as night fell, everyone held their breath. Suwa handed a sword to Tokiyuki, and at Shizuku's signal, "Here it comes." The vile uncle charged like a demon, seeing the lone Tokiyuki under the moonlight as an enticing young boy. Tokiyuki turned to see his uncle with tears in his eyes, who only saw him as a means to wealth and glory, and started to perform, assuring Tokiyuki there was no longer anything to fear, and that he would escape with him. As he approached, Tokiyuki asked why he betrayed his brother, gripping the sword tightly. The next second, Ayako and Kojiru descended from the sky, unexpectedly blocked by the uncle's sword across his back, sending them flying. The uncle realized Tokiyuki had lured him into a trap with people ready to ambush nearby. The boy's expression was so perfect, it didn't arouse any suspicion. Unfortunately, he was appointed as his brother's guardian, not just because he was his uncle, but because he was strong enough for the role. The old brute removed his clothes, swirled his sword, and the tree behind him snapped instantly. Amidst the dust, he charged towards Tokiyuki, who had already drawn his blade but was sent flying with a single move. Kojiru and Ayako stepped in front of Tokiyuki, but to no avail. The old brute's strikes were fierce, flawless, and his strength terrifying. Kojiru and Ayako together could barely withstand him. Tokiyuki felt utter despair. After all, they were just children. Their initial surprise attack failed, and they were no match for the old brute. Amidst these thoughts, Ayako and Kojiru were both knocked back. The old brute rushed straight at Tokiyuki, proud of his betrayal of his lord's son, boasting to Tokiyuki about the day he betrayed Tokiyuki's brother. Without needing soldiers, he had brutally beaten the young boy himself, then picked up his battered nephew. Now before him was an even more tempting target, Tokiyuki. With visions of capturing the boy and claiming his reward, the old brute was determined. Tokiyuki, flushed from the exertion, drew Sua's attention. At this moment, Kojiru and Ayako were ordered to retreat, giving a chance to assess Tokiyuki and see who truly held the power to thrive in chaos. Expecting an easy kill against the nearly defenseless Tokiyuki, the old brute was surprised as each of his strikes was effortlessly dodged. Tokiyuki not only saw through his moves, but seemed to enjoy the challenge, growing more excited as the battle progressed. His skills were not from training, but innate, born from a knack for escaping. Sua noted that Tokiyuki was not cowardly, just loved to flee. It seemed he had wings on his back, always reveling in the thrill of escape. Before the Kamakura unrest, Sua had seen this kind nature and thoughtfulness towards companions in Tokiyuki, just like any ordinary child. Yet on the battlefield, this child played gleefully like a monster. Serving such a lord must be endlessly entertaining, Kojiru and the others agreed. Once again, Kojiru and Ayako charged to assist Tokiyuki, for although he could dodge every attack, he struggled to strike back. Their task was to create openings for him. The old brute grew increasingly terrified. If the boy lived, he would forever be chased while escaping. Just then, the other two children struck, knocking his sword away and pushing him towards Tokiyuki. The old brute chased Tokiyuki unarmed, but Ayako kicked him from behind, causing him to pull out his sword from the ground. Just as he was about to strike Ayako, Kojiru threw a sword, knocking it away. The sword flew out and he fell. Now was the moment. Tokiyuki seized the opportunity, leaped forward, and with both hands, he brought his sword down heavily under the moonlight, aiming for the old brute's neck and decapitating him. The head rolled on the ground, just like the ball his brother played with that day. His brother said Tokiyuki would become a hero and encouraged him to keep going because he believed he could do it. After Tokiyuki decapitated his uncle with a single stroke, he fled towards the outskirts of Kamakura by moonlight with Sua and others. Sua asked Tokiyuki how he felt about his first battle experience. Tokiyuki said he felt nothing particular since he was just focused on escaping. When he came to his senses, the enemy's head was already before his eyes, thanks largely to his companions. Blushing, Tokiyuki thanked the three of them. However, Sua mentioned that he also played a significant role. Despite being a lord who would be the enemy's primary target, he was on the battlefield, and his followers were reliable. With these two factors, the restoration of the Hojo family was imminent. Fired up by these words, Tokiyuki raised his sword towards the distant Kamakura and vowed, "I will return here and defeat the main culprit, Ashikaga." After his declaration, he threw his sword, which accidentally struck a wolf. Tokiyuki, momentarily looking cool, ended up fleeing in utter panic. The group escaped Kamakura with great difficulty and reached Sua's territory. Here, Tokiyuki was supposed to thrive in a new environment, but immediately thought of escaping again and fell into a trap prepared by Sua. Sua had set this trap knowing Tokiyuki would try to escape. Sua ominously told Tokiyuki that no matter where he ran, Sua would know immediately since this was his domain, Sua Grand Shrine. Tokiyuki's immediate task was to learn martial arts and military tactics. Unwilling, Tokiyuki tried to escape but stepped into another one of Sua's traps. Shizuku came to comfort him, explaining her father's eccentric but well-meaning nature, then provided him with a ladder. As Tokiyuki climbed out, he saw Sua apologizing to his daughter, but still couldn't trust him fully. Tokiyuki kept trying to escape every day, but Sua didn't give up on him, telling the other children that Tokiyuki was inherently earnest and straightforward, but had been raised as a puppet leader without significant ambitions, hence did not see the point in serious study. It was Sua's fault for not yet showing Tokiyuki that he had the power to help him achieve his goals. One day, during a heavy rain, Tokiyuki fled again, only to find Sua on his escape route. Impatient, Tokiyuki declared that even if he didn't learn anything scholarly, he would act as he wished, content to just flee on the battlefield, even if his army was defeated. Suddenly serious, Suwa swore to the gods that they would never be defeated because he was the true deity. After saying this, Suwa lifted a bell to demonstrate his divine power. The raindrops in the air suddenly paused, then gathered with the movement of Suwa's hands. Tokiyuki, unable to resist, ran towards it. The rainwater formed streams, which then gathered into droplets and exploded in the sky, clearing the weather. Standing in the sunlight, Suwa appeared godlike, and with a high wave of his arm, the people below shouted in unison, their voices echoing through the heavens. Tokiyuki couldn't help but be stirred by the cheers of the people. These individuals were not only residents of Suwa's territory, but also his followers. They were known for their robust and indestructible solidarity, so Tokiyuki could be at ease, for he had a deity to rely on. Next, all Tokiyuki needed to do was develop the qualities of a hero so that he could collaborate with the divine as a hero himself. Tokiyuki was finally moved and, blushing, declared his intent to return to his studies. His expression was simply too adorable. Suwa, happy with the progress, embraced the young lord tightly, while Tokiyuki resisted, yet couldn't help but start to trust this man. Suwa, seeing his goal achieved, told his brothers that their task was completed. The people below immediately deflated, ready to collect their appearance fees, making Tokiyuki realize he had been tricked. Regardless of his struggles, Suwa lifted the young lord onto his shoulders, and the next moment, stepped into a trap. Before he knew it, Tokiyuki had grown accustomed to life there. Next, he needed to gather his own retainers, those who would willingly risk their lives to fight for him. Suwa had already prepared 3 such individuals for him. Kojiru, a peerless swordsman of their generation who could lead the troops in the future. Ayako, not only immensely strong but also talented, suitable as a female warrior serving her lord. And Shizuku, detail-oriented and skilled in various secret techniques, perfect to oversee all affairs. The 3 were about the same age as Tokiyuki. Growing up with their lord would cultivate tacit understanding and trust, enabling them to become closely knit in the future. However, Tokiyuki would have to discover and expand his retinue on his own thereafter. After getting to know each other, Kojiru asked Tokiyuki what he wanted to do next. Tokiyuki, after a moment's thought, suggested playing tag, but this was immediately vetoed since their lord was too good at escaping, making the game utterly predictable. The other 3's suggestions weren't any more practical, but then Ayako proposed going hunting. Tokiyuki was surprised, given they were from a shrine, that they could still take life. Shizuku explained that Suwa, also a god of hunting, didn't mind these activities. In fact, while they were discussing, Suwa had already started grilling delicious meat. In the forest, Shizuku was the first to spot a rabbit and tried to charm it with her arms, but the rabbit immediately ran away. Tokiyuki shot an arrow and hit it, but Kojiru, unsatisfied, stepped forward to cut down branches blocking the view and asked Tokiyuki to shoot again. Before Tokiyuki could take another shot, Ayako threw a large clod of earth, almost turning the rabbit into a mist of blood, but unfortunately missed. Just as the rabbit escaped again and the trio caught up, they saw a ferocious beast devour the rabbit entirely. This was the rumored man-eating giant demon. Witnessing this bloody scene, Tokiyuki was momentarily speechless. Yet, his enemy Ashikaga was far more ferocious than this beast. If he couldn't even slay this demon, how could he speak of revenge? At that moment, the ox demon charged fiercely at them. The group immediately scattered in all directions. Kojiru took the opportunity to fire an arrow, but it was deflected by the ox demon's tough hide. Seeing that the beast was about to charge again, Kojiru urgently called for everyone to run uphill, believing they were outmatched and should flee with their lord. However, Shizuku had climbed a tree at some point and pointed out that it wasn't just her and Ayako there. Lord Tokiyuki was also present. "Me? Fight the ox demon?" Tokiyuki exclaimed. Shizuku's plan was for Tokiyuki to act as bait to lure the ox demon under the pine trees on the other side. During this time, Kojiru and Ayako would move ahead. They quickly understood Shizuku's intent and left, leaving Tokiyuki behind. Fortunately, with his agility maxed out, the ox demon's fierce attacks couldn't touch him. Tokiyuki always managed to escape at the last moment, leading the beast toward the location Shizuku had mentioned. Kojiru and Ayako, who had already arrived, couldn't help but admire his dodging skills. Before the ox demon arrived, they prepared further. Ayako threw a large rock to sharpen another rock below. Kojiru also gauged the distance. Meanwhile, the ox demon finally reached the bottom. Hearing Kojiru's taunt, it abandoned Tokiyuki as its target and charged directly at him and Ayako. However, the two quickly retreated, and the ox demon crashed into the pine tree and fell off the cliff, impaling itself on the sharp rock below. After the exhilarating experience, the young boys and girls went to enjoy a hot spring. Tokiyuki's face turned red with comfort, and he gained a new appreciation for his subordinates' strengths. They planned to grill the ox demon for a feast. Shizuku gently caressed the body of the ox demon, speculating that it might be an ancient beast that had survived alone after losing all its family. She gently closed its eyes, lamenting that if it had had a companion, perhaps it wouldn't have turned to evil. While Tokiyuki was pondering her words, Kojiru suddenly suggested holding their next strategy meeting in the hot spring. Everyone supported the idea, and Tokiyuki stopped thinking about other matters. Why wear clothes in a hot spring? They also named their group, initially proposing the tail-tucking, oil-smearing, fleeing party, due to their lord's knack for escaping, but Tokiyuki vetoed it. After some discussion and fun, they settled on the fleeing young lord party, which Tokiyuki was very pleased with. They then prepared to barbecue, only to find that Suwa had already eaten all the meat, cheekily claiming he was purifying its soul with his divine stomach, which earned him a beating from the kids. Meanwhile, Ashikaga was beginning to suspect that Suwa was up to something. See how Ashikaga wins people's hearts. After Emperor Godaigo seized power, to reward Ashikaga for his significant contributions in the campaign against the Kamakura shogunate, he bestowed upon him a character from his own name. From then on, Ashikaga was renamed Ashikaga Takauji. The emperor also asked if there was any official position he desired, but Ashikaga politely declined, stating that he was merely a warrior. However, he mentioned that his followers were men of high moral and intellectual caliber, courageous and wise, and hoped they could attain some official ranks. This act, indeed, earned him much praise. Only Ashikaga's chief steward felt that his lord's smile was becoming increasingly unhuman. When Ashikaga reopened his eyes, they contained countless eyeballs. Among Ashikaga's followers was Sadamune, who had originally defected from the Hojo clan. Ashikaga assigned him the responsibility of Shinano, which was originally Suwa territory. He speculated that the remnants of the Hojo clan might be hiding there, and hoped Sadamune would uncover them. Sadamune readily accepted the task. His archery skills and eyesight were unrivaled, capable of distinguishing even the gender of lice in Ashikaga's hand. Meanwhile, Tokiyuki was practicing swordsmanship under the supervision of Suwa. He assumed a firm stance, but his posture collapsed in the next second, unable to even slice through a bundle of straw. Suwa explained that this was because Tokiyuki's muscles were always ready to flee even during an attack, making his torso weak when swinging the sword. In such cases, he suggested a good massage might help. Have you finished massaging him? Let me have a turn. Fortunately, Tokiyuki had a natural talent for archery, probably because his father enjoyed watching archery competitions, and Tokiyuki had practiced extensively. So, Suwa advised him to start training in archery, as running away would certainly demoralize the troops if he were to become a great general. He needed to learn how to defeat enemies while fleeing. However, Suwa himself was not skilled in archery and was considering where to find a teacher for Tokiyuki when Sadamune visited. Tokiyuki had never heard of him before. He probably never had the status to enter their residence. Suwa had some children hide in a small wooden hut and went to meet Sadamune. Sadamune's visit was a show of force. With the shogunate overthrown and power returned to the emperor, he had chosen the right side. Appointed by the emperor as the lord of Shinano, his status had now reversed with Suwa's. After all, the Suwa family had fought for the Hojo clan, and their lands were naturally confiscated. Besides informing Suwa of this, Sadamune had another purpose: to demand the surrender of any Hojo remnants. As he spoke, he pressed an arrowhead against Suwa's throat. Suwa was not the least bit flustered, claiming he had never seen any Hojo remnants. Yet, everything around him could not escape Sadamune's keen eyes. The two warriors in the distance, an old man in the crowd holding a dagger for emergencies, and several children peeking through the hut window. All looked suspicious. However, Sadamune did not launch a full-scale search today. He merely made his presence known. Before leaving, he mentioned offering another deer to the Suwa deity. but aimed his bow at an innocent girl nearby, shooting through one of her ears. After shooting, he and his men left triumphantly. Tokiyuki and the others were furious, but fortunately, the girl was not seriously injured. This incident only highlighted Sadamune's exceptional archery skills. Tokiyuki understood that although it was a disgraceful act for a warrior, Sadamune's archery was indeed beautiful. Just as he expressed this, Kojiro and Shizuku scorned him unanimously. However, Suwa appreciated his honesty and tolerance, believing he definitely had the potential to become a great general. Suwa couldn't help but smile secretly, thinking he had finally found a good teacher. Sadamune's visit had two purposes: to capture Hojo remnants and to use this as an excuse to weaken Suwa's influence. Tokiyuki also had two goals: to keep his true identity hidden from Sadamune, and to secretly learn his archery skills. Given that Sadamune would likely visit often, Tokiyuki planned to observe from hiding and learn by stealth. This was a game of hide-and-seek, evading the watchful eyes, and the thrill of possibly being discovered or shot at any moment would surely excite Tokiyuki. Excited by just the thought, Suwa wasted no time and immediately announced that a dog chase event would be held at Suwa Taisha in 3 days. On the day of the event, Shizuku encouraged Tokiyuki to do his best. Suwa reminded them not to casually mention Lord Tokiyuki's name outside and to use a pseudonym instead. Shizuku blushed and expressed her wish to call Tokiyuki brother before shyly running off. As expected, Sadamune arrived with his men. Suwa wasn't surprised and immediately declared the event open, releasing all the dogs. Sadamune led the way, his first arrow striking a white dog, and each subsequent arrow hit vital upper body parts, a very difficult feat. Tokiyuki noticed that Suwa was trembling, not out of fear of Sadamune, but because such actions might be deemed animal cruelty in the future, which would be quite problematic for him. It was essentially a disclaimer from the production team. Sadamune quickly won first place in the individual category and openly mocked the others. When some objected, claiming there were still many strong competitors yet to participate, Sadamune challenged them to a bet. If their so-called strong competitors could not beat him, then they would have no right to interfere with any searches for Hojo remnants or question any suspects in Suwa territory. Suwa naturally agreed to the wager, stating that if they won, Sadamune would no longer be able to cause trouble in the territory under the guise of protection. Sadamune never thought he would lose. He had already imagined Suwa losing the bet in disgrace. Instead, Suwa sent out a handsome young boy, claiming he was the least promising child in their territory. Then, he added a new rule. Hitting the opponent's body would score the same as hitting a dog. Sadamune felt this rule was tailor-made for him. However, Kojiro and Ayako were anxious, feeling certain their young lord was set to lose, and even Shizuku expressed her confusion. Suwa, on the other hand, argued that competing against a master could lead to great growth. He envisioned a future where Tokiyuki would unlock a new level of growth by competing against Sadamune. After this battle, he would surely learn some impressive new technique. Of course, he left the decision to Tokiyuki, who naturally chose to follow Suwa's advice, mounting a large horse with his bow at the ready. At this moment, Sadamune, feeling humiliated, directed all his anger at Tokiyuki. Once the referee announced the start, both charged forward. Sadamune decided to shoot at the young boy, but Tokiyuki fired first. Sadamune immediately redirected his target to Tokiyuki and shot back, but Tokiyuki dodged it. Before the match, Suwa had informed Tokiyuki that Sadamune concentrates deeply with each arrow, disliking rapid fire. This meant Tokiyuki had a chance to score by shooting dogs before Sadamune's next arrow was ready. Among these dogs was a red one, a seasoned actor arranged by Suwa to cooperate with Tokiyuki's movements and pretend to be hit, allowing Tokiyuki to score first. Thus, Tokiyuki kept dodging Sadamune's arrows while shooting dogs to score. By the time Sadamune realized, he was left with only one arrow. If this arrow missed, he was sure to lose. In desperation, Sadamune shifted his target back to the dogs, which, like Tokiyuki, were specially selected by Suwa for their ability to evade. As Sadamune focused on the dogs, Tokiyuki took the opportunity to aim at Sadamune. The anxiety, hesitation, and fear of being targeted were sure to disturb Sadamune's composure. Unexpectedly, Sadamune ran into Tokiyuki's blind spot, a position where he could not be hit no matter what. Tokiyuki quickly turned his horse around. Just then, Sadamune was ready to shoot, his target still on Tokiyuki. With a whoosh, the arrow flew out, hitting Tokiyuki, and Sadamune suddenly scored 5 points, reversing the score. However, Sadamune had no arrows left. Tokiyuki touched the blood on his head, feeling a wave of fear. If it had been a real arrow, he would have been dead. He immediately spurred his horse to run, his face unable to hide the excitement. Sadamune hit Tokiyuki, instantly reversing the score, but he ran out of arrows. This gave Tokiyuki a chance, yet Sadamune kept closely behind him, continuously blocking his shots and deliberately bumping into a little boy's horse, almost extinguishing Tokiyuki's fighting spirit. Then Suwa started to shine, challenging Tokiyuki to think of shooting while escaping. Surprisingly, Tokiyuki came up with a plan. His mind was clearest while fleeing, quickly taking control of the situation. Knowing Sadamune would do everything to block his shots, Tokiyuki turned around at the moment Sadamune attempted to interfere and aimed an arrow at him. Still, it was hard to aim, so Tokiyuki boldly stood on one leg, balancing on the bow to shoot an arrow at Sadamune's chin, scoring 2 points. Not only did he show decisive courage, but he also demonstrated the balance needed for acrobatic shooting and his flexibility. At that moment, Sadamune was still on the ground. Seeing Tokiyuki charging, he hurriedly covered his head, but Tokiyuki rode past him and then turned to shoot Sadamune's right ear. This was the restful horseback shot, similar to the tactics the Parthian Empire used to defeat the mighty Roman army with their renowned back-shooting strategy. Tokiyuki scored 3 points in one go, winning the match. Looking down at Sadamune, he said this was to return the favor for the earlier shot that injured the priestess's ear. Sadamune lost the bet and left in frustration. On his way back, he pondered Tokiyuki's every move, sensing an inexplicable nobility. Could he be from the Hojo clan? Yet why would Suwa allow such an important figure to appear openly before him? The more Sadamune thought, the more perplexed he became. Suwa had anticipated this, already spreading rumors nationwide about a possible Hojo clan member to divert the enemy's attention, allowing him and Tokiyuki to build their strength unnoticed. Currently, Tokiyuki's identity was merely a common scribe at the Suwa shrine, so he had to work daily to avoid suspicion if enemies approached. Just as Kojiru was about to say Sadamune wouldn't return so soon, they saw a strange man waving at them. This time, Sadamune brought an imperial decree from the emperor, stating that as a punishment for supporting the Hojo family, some lands from Suwa and his followers' territories would be confiscated into Sadamune's domain. He taunted Suwa, demanding that he expel his followers from these lands within 10 days. In the evening, Suwa's followers discussed what to do. The opponent was too oppressive, and they felt compelled to fight back. However, Suwa said it wasn't the right time and asked everyone to go home, keeping only Tokiyuki behind. He wanted to introduce a boy named Kazama Genba, a thief skilled in sneaking anywhere and stealing anything. Suwa hoped Genba could steal the imperial decree from Sadamune's residence, buying time for his followers. He stressed that not all battles are won by honorable means. Sometimes, unconventional methods are necessary. After convincing Tokiyuki, Suwa noticed a subordinate's unease about sending children on such tasks. Just as Suwa finished explaining, the subordinate left, sporting a pair of fox ears. The next day, Tokiyuki and his friends went to Genba's village. The villagers fled at the mention of Genba's name, and even the chickens hid in barrels. Genba appeared behind Tokiyuki wearing a scary mask, startling him. Tokiyuki promptly invited Genba to join his group, but Genba revealed Tokiyuki's identity and stole their wallets. He demanded 100 mon for his silence and the same amount for each job thereafter. Tokiyuki was shocked that Genba only wanted money. He asked Genba if he was sure he didn't want a domain. Genba, surprised, hadn't considered that. Helping Tokiyuki could make them heroes deserving of their own lands. Yet Genba only wanted immediate payment. Tokiyuki embraced him, praising his lack of greed, while Shizuku and Kojiru tempted him with the prospect of earning more if he served under Tokiyuki, who would grant him lands when victorious. Realizing the situation, Genba agreed to help on the condition that Tokiyuki join him, refusing to work for an irresponsible employer. Tokiyuki readily agreed. At night, the two observed the Sadamune residence from a tree. 3 human heads were displayed in the yard, all of whom had tried to sneak in and steal. They risked the same fate if not careful. The room holding the imperial decree was locked with 3 locks. The locks were not the issue. It was the 2 guards at the door. However, for Genba, this was still not a problem. Tokiyuki immediately showed admiration as Genba demonstrated his exceptional skills. Jumping down from the tree, he inserted a stick into the ground and vaulted over the estate's wall, then threw a rope to pull Tokiyuki over. It was Tokiyuki's first thrilling experience, and he was extremely excited. Genba questioned Tokiyuki, asking if he wasn't ashamed to just do as others told him, despite being a samurai's son. Unbeknownst to him, Tokiyuki had already shed all shame when escaping from Kamakura, and wished to repay Suwa's kindness. Genba couldn't agree with Tokiyuki's mindset, arguing that owing favors always ends up empty, and only money or fear can subdue people. He recounted a time someone asked him to investigate an affair and didn't pay. He retaliated by mixing cockroaches and urine into the woman's rice porridge, instilling fear in everyone not to cross him. However, he didn't let Tokiyuki continue the risky adventure with him. Instead, he disguised himself as Sadamune and ordered the 2 guards to fix the fence, perfectly imitating Sadamune to the point that the guards didn't dare disobey, even asking why Sadamune had fox ears as he left. Genba roared, "That's the cute part!" Then they boldly entered the room. But after finding the imperial decree, Genba didn't hand it to Tokiyuki, sensing his momentary doubt. After all, he could become anyone he wanted, like now, when he transformed into Tokiyuki and asked, "Do you have the confidence to command me without suspicion, young lord betrayed by 1,000,000 warriors?" Yet their whispering was overheard by one of Sadamune's spies. Tokiyuki and Genba were discovered while sneaking into the Sadamune residence. Genba noticed they were being surrounded. Since they had already found the imperial decree, Genba prepared to leave immediately, telling Tokiyuki to follow. Tokiyuki tightened his headband, showing a determined expression, and both quickly retreated from the cabin. Genba threw several smoke bombs to cover their escape, but one of the pursuers had excellent hearing and detected them climbing the opposite fence only by listening. He shot an arrow towards them, but it missed due to inferior skills compared to Sadamune. Tokiyuki and Genba took this chance to climb over. Nearby, Kojiru and Ayako, alerted by Genba's signal, acted swiftly to distract the pursuers. The sharp-eared pursuer didn't hear footsteps running towards the horses and guessed they were still nearby, hiding in the forest outside. He confidently approached the forest. Genba and Tokiyuki held their breath, fearing discovery. Genba considered betraying his young master, but just as he was about to leave, Tokiyuki looked back at him. The sharp-eared pursuer heard the noise and swung his large sword at them. Fortunately, Tokiyuki tackled him in time. The sword hit a tree, and the pursuer couldn't follow up quickly. Tokiyuki and Genba continued to slide down. Tokiyuki had a cut on his back but did not blame Genba, admitting he had suspected him earlier. He confessed that if he died, he wouldn't be able to apologize. Tokiyuki acknowledged he was a lord with a weak heart and petty spirit, but would never betray his subordinates. He enjoyed escaping with Genba, which kept him excited all night. Even if Genba betrayed him, they had to stick together during their escape. Tokiyuki then showed a bright smile. Meanwhile, Sadamune chased them on horseback, but struggled with his vision at night. His good friend, the sharp-eared pursuer, joined him, and they rode closely together, their bodies moving with the horse's gallop. On the other hand, Tokiyuki and Genba were close to their hidden horses when an arrow split the air, narrowly missing them and splitting a large tree. Clearly Sadamune's work. The sound of hooves was still far away. Sadamune's precise shooting in the dark was because he and the sharp-eared pursuer had merged. Genba judged that escaping with the injured Tokiyuki would be difficult. Sadamune and the sharp-eared man thought the same and prepared to shoot again. Sadamune adjusted his aim, using the sharp-eared man's hearing, targeting the wounded Tokiyuki. However, Genba had no intention of abandoning Tokiyuki. He returned, throwing a blast bomb into the air and appeared before them. The sharp-eared man, aware of Genba's background, his father was exiled for dishonorable tactics and became a thief, believed Genba was there to steal the sacred decree. Genba claimed he was just looking for fun, then kicked a tree trunk. Countless birds flew out, their flapping so loud it caused the sharp-eared man a headache, confusing his sense of direction. Genba moved swiftly around them, too fast for Sadamune to shoot accurately. Genba even disguised himself as the sharp-eared man, cutting Sadamune's bowstring unexpectedly and kicking them off their horses. While mocking them, Genba threw 2 incendiaries, igniting the dry grass around. He informed them that paper was not meant for stealing, but for burning. Sadamune realized something was wrong when he saw thick black smoke rising from his estate. While they were distracted by Genba, Tokiyuki had returned to the estate and set fire to the storeroom holding the sacred decree. Taking advantage of Sadamune's distraction, Genba also escaped. The sharp-eared man heard the 2 decoys who had fled earlier returning nearby, apparently meeting up with Tokiyuki. Sadamune tried to shoot an arrow, but found his bowstring already cut by Genba. Tokiyuki and his group regrouped to return. Seeing Tokiyuki's injury, Kojiru and Ayako urged Genba to be more careful with him. Tokiyuki thanked Genba, hoping for another game of hide-and-seek together. Genba remembered his father's dying words about following a leader worth serving, but to always remember to make money. He then approached Tokiyuki, proposing a contract with a fiefdom as collateral, warning that if Tokiyuki defaulted, he would pursue his descendants and friends to the ends of the earth. Tokiyuki's eyes lit up, asking if Genba would also play tag with his kids. Stared at by a beautiful young boy, Genba almost lost control. After Sadamune's sacred decree was burned, he could no longer order the Suwa retainers to leave. However, Sadamune remained calm, knowing a new decree would arrive in a month. Suddenly, his subordinate reported that they could no longer seize Suwa's territory because many in Kyoto, seeking rewards, had falsely reported their achievements. The emperor, annoyed by the hassle, declared that all territories except the Hojos would remain unchanged, saving Suwa's land. Infuriated, Sadamune threw a tantrum on the ground, while Suwa's side immediately held a victory party and personally bandaged Tokiyuki's wounds, thanking him for buying time for the retainers. Tokiyuki was overjoyed by the praise, and Genba joined everyone outside for drinks. Kojiru remarked that Genba might even sneak into Ashikaga's bedroom and assassinate him. However, Suwa dismissed the idea as impossible and took the opportunity to have Tokiyuki better understand his formidable enemy. Meanwhile, in Kyoto, Ashikaga traveled with a few attendants. The emperor's son seized the opportunity to attack him. As they confronted each other with weapons, Ashikaga still managed a smile and asked why the prince insisted on taking his life. The prince asserted that Ashikaga would one day betray his father. To prevent this, he would rather stain his hands. The prince and his men fought bravely. During the melee, Ashikaga approached the prince with steady steps and decapitated his retainers with a single sword strike, so swiftly that others barely grasped what happened. As they continued to rush him, they found it impossible to get close. Their heads were severed as easily as chopping vegetables. Convinced of his belief, the prince attacked Ashikaga, who effortlessly parried and simultaneously beheaded others. Unaware, the prince was left alone. Ashikaga, holding the tip of his sword, knelt before him, asserting his unwavering loyalty to the emperor. The prince, unable to listen, only thought of gathering allies to one day eradicate this demon. Unexpectedly, his allies did come, but they bypassed him, rushing straight to Ashikaga. They all cared if Ashikaga was injured. Moments ago, they supported the prince, but suddenly, like brainwashed, they became Ashikaga's followers. They escorted him towards the emperor's residence. The prince felt a bad premonition, tried to push through the crowd, but the door eventually opened. Ashikaga looked down at him, truly a non-human monster, with every hair controlling his followers like living spores. Hearing Suwa's story, Tokiyuki could hardly believe it. This Ashikaga was completely different from the one he knew. Suwa asked him again if he was prepared to face a top adversary. Before Tokiyuki could answer, Ayako hurriedly reported that Genba, drunk, was groping shrine maidens and threatening to urinate everywhere. Tokiyuki decided to leave with Kojiru and Ayako to discipline this new subordinate. But before leaving, he answered Suwa, grateful for everything given to him. Despite his current insignificance and the vast gap between him and Ashikaga, he would not give up, but continue collecting treasures and facing that man again and again. Tokiyuki facing Ashikaga was like a rabbit challenging a lion, but the lion did not yet know that one day it would fear the small rabbit. Unknowingly, Tokiyuki had been in Suwa's territory for half a year. He also spent his first New Year here. Kojiru and Ayako blindfolded him and led him to the forest. When they released their hands, he saw an expanse of white land. The entire lake was frozen. The next second, Tokiyuki fell and lay on the ground, laughing heartily. The 5 members of the escape party began to frolic there. However, Suwa woke up in a cold sweat, as he had entered a period where he couldn't see the future. Meanwhile, a new general named Shoken joined Sadamune. He looked untrustworthy, which is why Sadamune, who was rising rapidly, chose him. Sadamune's first order to him was to gradually encroach on Suwa's territory. News of enemy movements at the northern and western borders reached Suwa. However, Suwa couldn't focus on the discussions as his mind was clouded with the inability to see the future. Due to a lack of scouts, Tokiyuki volunteered to lead his friends there. The clan praised Tokiyuki, but Suwa was anxious. He couldn't see anything. If something happened, the Hojo lineage could end. Tokiyuki had to reassure him, boasting about his excellent fleeing skills and that Kojiru and Ayako had scouting experience. The clan thought this was the best plan, but Suwa disagreed, citing various potential accidents: dying from parasites after eating a slug, or from a nosebleed seeing a sexy girl, or from shame recalling embarrassing memories, which could end the Hojo line. Despite Suwa's objections, the clan agreed for Tokiyuki and the kids to scout. They ran off, and Suwa held back, shouted that Tokiyuki wasn't actually good at fleeing, but was just a big pervert who got excited by it. Tokiyuki, embarrassed, turned red and discussed with his companions what to bring for scouting. They were supposed to travel light, but Suwa prepared a whole cart for them and lay under it, worriedly watching Tokiyuki. "You're the bigger pervert," they thought. They then changed into warm cotton clothes and saw the fur coats and blankets Suwa had prepared. Suwa continued to stare at Tokiyuki worriedly. If he was so concerned about the lineage, he could just have Tokiyuki father a child. Finally, they departed successfully, leaving Suwa behind. Shizuku was used to such odd phases from their father, but appreciated Suwa's concern as they left. After a day's journey, they finally reached Nakayama village in the northern part of Suwa territory before sunset. The group did not approach the village rashly. Instead, they confirmed their next steps. They planned to inquire as messengers from Suwa Grand Shrine, observe the surrounding area the next day, and assess the enemy's forces. They intended to compile the information afterward. Just as Shizuku finished speaking, a white-haired youth suddenly attacked them. Thanks to the timely reactions of Kojiru and Ayako, who blocked the attack, torches lit up around them. They were surrounded. The youth wielded 2 knives as if spinning wind and fire wheels, capable of holding off both Kojiru and Ayako alone. The remaining 3, including Tokiyuki, were not skilled in combat. However, Tokiyuki had faith in his companions, who were now vastly different from when he practiced with them. He realized that he had occasionally won only because they had let him win. Recalling how he once told Ayako he would protect her when he grew up, Ayako's heart fluttered, and the wooden sword she gripped with 3 fingers halted Tokiyuki's advance, her other hand free to pat his head. Remembering this made Tokiyuki blush with shame. All this was arranged by Suwa, as Tokiyuki's adversaries were warriors trying to transcend human limits. Facing these monsters, fleeing skills might not always be useful. Thus, Kojiru and Ayako had to become meticulous and increasingly skilled warriors to protect their lord under any circumstances. Tokiyuki was stunned as he watched. Suddenly, the white-haired youth noticed Shizuku behind and stopped to ask if she was Shizuku, recalling she had once hosted him for a meal in eastern Shinano. Shizuku remembered him too. The youth, named Fubuki, was roaming in search of a lord to serve loyally. He had arrived in the village 3 days earlier, just in time to help when people bearing Sadamune's flag raided the village. He had wiped them out and did the same with the next 2 groups. However, the village's food supplies were running low, and they couldn't last much longer. The torchbearers were actually children, because all the adults had been killed before Fubuki's arrival. Every time the enemy came, Fubuki had the children use torches to distract the enemy or set traps. Through training these children, Fubuki felt he might be better suited as a talent scout and mentor. If there was a lord somewhere who thirsted for knowledge, that would be perfect. Tokiyuki's eyes lit up, but he did not reveal his identity immediately. They followed Fubuki back to the village, where Tokiyuki noticed many bodies neatly arranged inside a house, surely the children's relatives. Fubuki spread out a map of the terrain while eating, and told Tokiyuki that the village was actually the largest strategic point in Suwa territory. It was easy to defend, but hard to attack, requiring only 100 soldiers to become a fortress. If taken by the enemy, they could greatly advantage from this position when attacking from the border, striking Suwa territory's richest settlements from two sides. This indicated that the commander of this operation was a master of military strategy. However, they also had Fubuki, a skilled strategist in both military and literary arts. But this strategist could really eat. It turned out the village's food stock was depleted because he ate it all. Fubuki explained that it might be because the weather was too cold, and no amount of food could warm him up. His first encounter with Shizuku also involved him eating all the offerings, which Shizuku then pretended had been eaten by a bear. Meanwhile, Suwa complained of hunger every day, causing a fuss. Yet, Tokiyuki liked him for unhesitatingly choosing to protect a village left with only children, showing his noble character. Tokiyuki greatly desired for Fubuki to become his support in reclaiming power, and secretly wanted to learn swordsmanship from him, hoping to surprise Kojiru and Ayako. However, Shizuku prioritized Tokiyuki's life above all, and suggested they flee with the children to the safe Suwa territory, which Tokiyuki refused. The children had already lost their parents. He didn't want them to lose their hometown too. Thus, he actively requested Fubuki's help, to let them also assist in battle, to which Fubuki was more than willing. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the village, Shoken sat amidst a pile of corpses, drinking heavily with ants crawling over his chest. They tortured and killed the captured villagers, believing that chanting Namu Amida Butsu afterward absolved them of their sins. His subordinates also called out in praise of Buddha. This army, capable of destroying a village with just 5 people, had already lost 3 groups to that village. After killing a villager, Shoken decided to personally lead a major attack this time. Tokiyuki and his team held a strategy meeting. Ayako and Shizuku went to borrow troops from a village at the foot of the mountain. Genba sought help from Suwa Grand Shrine. Fubuki, with the children, started digging traps early. Once Fubuki finished setting up, Tokiyuki quietly asked to speak with him alone. They went to a meadow outside the village. Immediately, Fubuki attacked Tokiyuki, who dodged easily and then counterattacked. Despite his full escape talent, Tokiyuki's attacks were weak, dealing minimal damage. Realizing this, Fubuki offered to teach him a sword technique even he could use to kill enemies. Fubuki first tested Tokiyuki's identity, who denied being of noble birth, claiming his father was a Suwa warrior who died in a fire, and he was taken in by the Suwa Grand Shrine. Moved by Tokiyuki's gentleness, Fubuki thought of a sword technique perfect for him, both the gentlest and most cruel, the Demon Heart Buddha Blade, usable only in one-on-one combat. Fubuki predicted the enemy's main force would attack the next day and decided Tokiyuki should confront the enemy leader. By the next evening, Shoken's army had quietly completed an enveloping maneuver. They didn't attack from the front, but planned to descend from the mountain, knowing they had lost scout units 3 times, a sign of preset traps. Opting for a surprise attack seemed more effective. In this era, a group of ruthless bandits, having lost their homelands and turned to piracy, tried to establish an independent kingdom. They were skilled in combat and tactics. Among these, Shoken was the most dangerous. At his command, the bandit army rushed down the mountain with torches, only to be met by a barrage of arrows from the summit. Realizing they were tricked but unable to retreat, Shoken ordered them to continue the descent, guessing the enemy lacked manpower, hence the tactical choice. Upon reaching the mountain's base, many slipped and fell. Fubuki had cut off water routes to surround the village with water, which froze overnight, turning the area outside the village into an ice rink. The bandits struggled to stand while facing arrows from the village and descending archers. Eventually, they were trapped on all sides. Shoken's venture failed quickly, losing most of his forces. Those who escaped the ice rink stepped into cave traps, severing their legs. Fubuki took matters into his own hands next. Although the Suwa supporters Shizuku found were skilled, their numbers were too few. They only managed to eliminate the enemy's lower ranks. 3 high-ranking officers still broke through. Seeing this, Shoken used his subordinates as decoys to distract the enemy while he armed himself for battle. He first eliminated the opposing archers who controlled the battlefield, calmly bypassing the ice and cave traps and clearing the defensive forces. He then entered the village with his 3 officers. Fubuki quickly identified him as the leader and instructed the reinforcements to focus on the remaining soldiers while the 4 of them would be dealt with by the children. As soon as Fubuki finished speaking, Kojiru and Ayako appeared. They began by slashing one officer's shoulder and blinding 2 others with a smoke bomb before both charged at Shoken. Ayako struck first, aiming at the enemy's abdomen, but her blade made no impact. Instead, the enemy's blade nearly struck her head, but Kojiru intervened in time and aimed at Shokan's throat, only to be blocked by his shield. Shokan was heavily armored, a true armored warrior. To penetrate his body, one had to aim for the tiny gaps in his armor. Even when Kojiru found such a gap, Shokan pushed him away, claiming he would not kill children but merely extract their teeth and tongues, sever their tendons, and enslave them. Hearing this, Ayako and Kojiru turned and fled, now certain they could evade his swordsmanship. They led Shokan into a room and locked the door once he entered. Tokiyuki was inside, sitting in front of a Buddha statue waiting for him. Kojiru shouted to Tokiyuki not to die before leaving with Ayako. Fubuki had said that leaving Tokiyuki alone would make it easier to defeat the bald warrior. Almost everything was going as Fubuki had predicted, which impressed Kojiru. Fubuki himself leaped down with dual swords, ready to join the battle personally. Meanwhile, Shoken surveyed the room's interior, his gaze finally settling on the pretty young boy in front of him. He suddenly burst into laughter, exclaiming, "Oh, I've been locked up, huh? But this little boy is indeed more valuable than those 2 kids just now. He could be worth at least 2 kanmen, maybe 3 with a bit of training in arts." Poor Tokiyuki was targeted again by this deranged man. Yet he only wanted to ask Shokan one question: whether it was he who ordered the extermination of the village children's parents. "Why commit such cruelty?" he demanded. Shokan replied plainly, "Good question. Killing parents gives me great pleasure. Selling their children afterwards feels even better. Those kids are doomed to suffer in this life anyway. Just thinking about their hopeless lives fills me with joy and satisfaction." His words revealed him as a true scoundrel. Tokiyuki, reassured by this, gripped his knife firmly, ready to face his opponent seriously, not as merchandise, but as a warrior. They stood off, poised for battle. Meanwhile, Fubuki was also facing 2 opponents. He did not attack rashly, but defended strenuously until Kojiru and Ayako returned, distracting one with taunts. This left Fubuki with just the clown. The clown laughed heartily, pleased to see his brother so annoyed, and claimed his brother was the strongest of them. Fubuki, however, silently led him aside. His earlier probing confirmed that the clown was the strongest and didn't want to reveal his own strength. Tokiyuki kept dodging Shokan's attacks. Shokan thought he had seen through the plan. Tokiyuki would run back and forth in the narrow room, waiting for Shoken's sword to get stuck before striking. Tokiyuki dusted off his head and face, not denying the assumption. To prevent Tokiyuki's success, Shoken had already switched to a shorter sword, unafraid in such a cramped space. As Shokan charged, Tokiyuki recalled Fubuki's advice. If he thought he couldn't win, he should knock over the candle and escape through the ceiling. The room's floor was oiled, potentially burning the enemy. But the best solution was for Tokiyuki to defeat the enemy leader alone. Lacking confidence at the time, Fubuki had told him he misunderstood the use of his sword. Kindness was his weapon, perfectly suited for cutting down enemies. Thinking this, Tokiyuki adopted the posture Fubuki taught him, one hand raised in front, like a merciful Buddha, quietly waiting for Shokan to charge. The next second, blood spurted from his wrist, and Shokan's face showed disbelief. Fubuki crafted a sword technique specifically for Tokiyuki. He explained that the essence of a sword, like a kitchen knife or saw, is best expressed in the drawing and cutting action. He instructed Tokiyuki to wait with one hand open and the other holding the sword until the enemy's sword moved between his hand and blade. At that moment, Tokiyuki was to twist his upper body to the left, letting the sword drop by its weight, then quickly draw the sword to the right and flee. The enemy's unprotected wrist would be cut, targeting the weak point on the inside of the forearm under the armor. However, Shokan remained calm, approaching Tokiyuki with a terrifying presence, questioning him and causing Tokiyuki to breathe heavily, not out of fear, but excitement. Seeing Tokiyuki's bright smile sent a chill through Shokan. Meanwhile, Kojiru and Ayako were outnumbered in a 2-on-1 fight. Their opponent wielded a long naginata, keeping them at a distance and mostly on the receiving end. During the fight, a strong man tore Ayako's clothes and threw her forcefully, then swung his sword at Kojiru while criticizing the two for being too light, delicate, and inexperienced to understand the adult pleasure of overpowering the weak with physical strength. Yet Ayako and Kojiru ignored him, Ayako took off her coat with her teeth still holding her sword, while Kojiru got up from under the debris. The strong man then insulted their lord, triggering their wrath. Shizuku, from a tree, began furiously blowing darts at him, and Ayako seized this moment to attack but was blocked. When her sword was knocked away, she grabbed the blade with her hands and trapped the sword handle with her body, immobilizing the opponent. Kojiru charged in, keenly aware that if they couldn't defeat adults with just a year and a half left until the predicted battle, they'd miss their lord's major conflict. Therefore, Kojiru's strike was swift and precise, chopping down at the strong man's shoulder. The man fell, incredulous at his defeat by these unknown youths. As he lay dying, Kojiru told him to inform the demons in hell that their lord was Tokiyuki, the rightful heir of Kamakura. The man, shocked but defiant, was quickly silenced by Ayako, who raised her naginata and struck his head. Meanwhile, the situation inside the Suwa house had also turned around. Shoken looked terrified. No matter how he slashed, he couldn't hit Tokiyuki. Instead, Tokiyuki would counterattack while fleeing. Shoken grew increasingly frustrated, slashing at the walls beside him as he chased Tokiyuki. Cornered, Tokiyuki leapt up, kicked off the wall, and struck Shoken. Blood from Shoken covered the cabin. If this continued, he would die from blood loss. Yet, Tokiyuki gave him no chance to stop the bleeding. He rushed forward, swiftly ducked under Shoken's blade, and became even more agile. In a flash, he was behind Shoken, dodging even the splashes of blood. To him, this seemed not a battle, but a thrilling game of tag. On another battlefield, Fubuki was dueling the enemy's strongest jester. The jester's blade was so fast it was nearly invisible. Despite dodging, Fubuki's shoulder was slashed. This made him curious about the jester's master. Naturally, the jester wouldn't reveal it. He had hidden his strength within the organization because he didn't want to be bossed around like other minions. He preferred playing the fool as the boss's sidekick until he could overthrow the boss and take his place. This was his way of surviving in troubled times, knowing when to hide. The jester's swordplay became even more fierce, preparing to deliver a fatal blow to Fubuki. However, in the next second, Fubuki exploited a gap, kneed him in the groin, and followed with a monkey steals the peach kick. The jester, incapacitated and clutching himself, was mocked by his opponent, who said, "What you hid wasn't as great as I thought." This pierced his arrogant self-image. The battle then became one-sided. Thinking of the village's strategic value and the hidden gem he had discovered, Fubuki smiled warmly. He felt that Tokiyuki harbored something exceptionally vast within him, irresistibly drawing him in. When the clown charged, Fubuki twirled his swords beautifully, crossed them, and pressed them against the clown's throat. He then swiftly took the clown's life. On Tokiyuki's side, the battle was also nearing its end. Despite the vast difference in strength and size, Tokiyuki played with Shoken like a cat with a mouse. Shoken was so dizzy he couldn't defend against Tokiyuki's sudden attacks. Despair was all that remained in his mind, thinking, "I am going to die." His consciousness began to fade. At that moment, Shoken remembered his youth. Since he wasn't the eldest son, he couldn't inherit any land and had to serve his brother. Since then, Shoken had honed his martial skills and tactics, leading a group to plunder a place for himself. He began to enjoy the thrill, using others' pain as his sustenance. Later, Shoken was invited to join a great battle in an attempt to reverse his fortunes. However, he lost and failed to make a name for himself. His lord told him to escape to a place where no pursuers could find him, saying there would always be a place where light would shine on him. Back then, Shoken scoffed at the idea, but now he saw it clearly. The bright light before him was Tokiyuki's smiling face. Shoken's expression was as if his soul had been purified. He dropped his knife and knelt on the spot. "Can you smile at someone like me in this hellish place?" he asked sincerely, then collapsed completely. Tokiyuki had indeed defeated the enemy leader on his own. His friends rushed in, hugged him, and celebrated. Tokiyuki modestly credited Fubuki. They just needed to spread the news of the leader's death, and the minions would likely scatter. Just then, as Fubuki finished speaking, Sadamune led his army and arrived. He shot an arrow directly at Tokiyuki, who narrowly dodged. Sadamune, furious, berated the youngsters. Fubuki, however, felt a sense of crisis. At this time, our allies were already exhausted from dealing with the existing enemy forces. They had no chance of winning. It was better to escape directly from the south, where there were no enemies. The next second, an army appeared on a nearby hill, led by their general Suwa. Seeing Suwa's army, Sadamune decided to retreat on the spot. and took Shokan's nearby troops with him. Before leaving, he noticed bloodstains on the door of a nearby cabin, which raised doubts in his mind. Suwa sent some troops to chase the enemy while he approached Tokiyuki, looked at him affectionately, and hugged him tightly. "I'm so glad you're safe," he said, and Tokiyuki let him hold on. Meanwhile, Shokan was being carried forward. If the bleeding had been stopped any later, he would not have survived. Shoken asked Sadamune why reinforcements were sent. Sadamune had received reports that they were wasting time in a massacre. Suwa would not miss this opportunity. Sadamune scolded Shokan harshly, but acknowledged his strategic insight during the battle and promised to grant him a piece of land to refine his skills in preparation for a future decisive battle with Suwa. The image of Buddha appeared in Shoken's mind, and the aura of a bandit faded from his eyes. After that, the era of the free-spirited bandit warriors gradually disappeared, marking their last, dazzling performance. Tokiyuki introduced Fubuki to Suwa, hoping the Suwa temple would provide him special treatment. Suwa, of course, did not refuse and became overly affectionate with the two handsome young boys, showing his familiar eccentricity. Tokiyuki then expressed his desire for Fubuki to join his retinue. However, Fubuki was reluctant because he planned to serve a lord who aimed to conquer the world. At this point, Tokiyuki had to reveal his true identity. He was Hojo Tokiyuki, also aiming to conquer the world. Fubuki spit out his rice in surprise. No wonder he always felt that Tokiyuki harbored something significant, but this was too much. As a skillful escaper and a son of the Hojo, all of Tokiyuki's abilities would become formidable weapons, instantly firing up Fubuki. He knelt on one knee and pledged allegiance to Tokiyuki, and thus the party of escapees gained another great general. After the battle, Tokiyuki and the survivors held a moment of silence for the fallen warriors. Tokiyuki felt guilty, knowing that these warriors had died protecting the village at his command. As their leader, he had to remember this sacrifice. Later, Suwa apologized to Tokiyuki, having realized the village's importance through Fubuki. Suwa promised to station guards there and temporarily house the children at the Suwa shrine. Suwa then confessed to having lost his vision of the future, a fact unknown to most. He asked Tokiyuki to help him regain his divine power and experience the incredible forces that exist in the world. Naturally, Tokiyuki agreed. The first favor Suwa asked for was eel, so Tokiyuki shamelessly approached Kojiru and Ayako to catch some. He then delivered the eel to Suwa, not admitting it was his own craving. The winter eel, rich in fat and tender, made Suwa feel invigorated, though it was not divine power. Next, Tokiyuki boldly asked the shrine maidens for garlic, which they promptly gathered from the mountains, but it proved useless. Tokiyuki then stealthily gathered rope and a shrine maiden outfit. Genba, sleeping in a tree, saw Tokiyuki stuffing straw into a human figure and dressing it in the outfit, still dissatisfied as he needed a real shrine maiden. After much effort, he carried the figure back, only to find his men discussing how he consumed so many vitality-boosting foods, made a life-sized shrine maiden doll, and had ropes for bondage. They joked about his age and interests, suggesting he might be a bit extreme. Tokiyuki's reputation suffered. Fubuki remained loyal, declaring their loyalty should not waver even if their lord was a huge pervert. Heartbroken, Tokiyuki listened to them discuss various perversions and stormed back to Suwa, finding him still grilling eel. After learning about the misunderstanding, Suwa comforted him, suggesting that a somewhat enigmatic ruler could more easily command respect. Unfortunately, Tokiyuki was no longer easily fooled. He grabbed Suwa by his two antennae-like whiskers, ready to drag him out and clear things up with everyone else. Suwa could only mention that he had one last request. That was to go down the mountain to fetch some sacred stream water. Drinking this water should improve things instantly. Tokiyuki was frustrated. "You should have said that from the start." Although he complained, he still grumbled all the way down the mountain. However, he felt as if something was surrounding him. Running quickly down, he saw a beam of light, and upon closer inspection, it was Shizuku performing the Kagura dance, seemingly playing with countless specks of light. After finishing the dance, Shizuku saw Tokiyuki and told him she was praying with them. Tokiyuki, however, saw nothing but Shizuku. She asked him to close his eyes and gently kissed his forehead. When he opened his eyes again, Tokiyuki was amazed to see various mythical beasts all around. Though they didn't lend Shizuku any power, they watched over her. As she spoke, she stroked the chin of a nine-tailed fox. Tokiyuki was stunned. This era was the last in which humans coexisted with fantasy. Shizuku fetched the stream water for Tokiyuki and kissed the bamboo tube. It seemed that her kiss endowed the water with divine power. Tokiyuki took the bamboo tube, feeling he glimpsed an incredible tip of an iceberg. yet he didn't understand why Suwa wanted him to see all this or what exactly Shizuku was. Meanwhile, Ashikaga was personally painting a statue of Buddha. After finishing, he was moved to tears by his own work, thinking it was truly well done. He then called his younger brother to discuss how to plan for the world. As soon as he saw his brother, Ashikaga was overjoyed and became playful. He quickly mentioned that he wanted his brother to go to Kamakura to strengthen its defenses. His intuition told him that the remnants of the Hojo clan would soon cause great turmoil. His brother sighed helplessly, but had to admit that Ashikaga's intuition was always accurate. Previously, he spent 3 days and nights encoding the location of a treasure, yet Ashikaga found it right away with his intuition. However, when it came to intellect, the younger brother was still superior. By then, he had already conceived around 100 defensive strategies for Kamakura. The brothers displayed great affection for each other. Ashikaga pointed out that although his brother claimed to have 100 strategies, there were actually only about 14, according to his intuition. One brother combined martial skills, personal charisma, and sharp intuition, while the other excelled in intelligence, calmness, and theory. Despite their different styles, their relationship was extremely close. After discussing serious matters, Ashikaga invited his brother to see the Buddha statue he had just painted. However, his brother sighed, felt an impulse to step into the room upon seeing the statue, but quickly regained his composure and withdrew his foot. Changing the subject, he mentioned that he had just acquired top-quality cedar planks, perfect for the walls of this room. In return, he hoped his elder brother would gift him the Buddha statue. Ashikaga readily agreed and entrusted the Kamakura matters entirely to him. After his departure, the younger brother breathed a sigh of relief. He could feel that his elder brother had recently surpassed the realm of mere sharp intuition and even began to doubt if he was still human. Later, the younger brother ordered his men to burn everything in the room except for the Buddha statue. It was crucial that Ashikaga's followers never see this painting, which for Ashikaga was merely bait in the mouth of a monster. At the same time, Tokiyuki gave the stream water to Suwa and told him about his encounter with Shizuku. Suwa did not answer Tokiyuki's questions, but drank the stream water and his divine power quickly restored. The mythical beasts Tokiyuki saw were actually manifestations of this divine power. Divine power is a force that exists beyond human vision. As the era and technology progress, Tokiyuki, who excels at escaping, will eventually find no place to stand. Everywhere is monitored by humans, including the villains he had fought before, who possessed powers unseen by the human eye. However, these powers are gradually depleting as human society continues to expand, and the unseen forces weaken. Such miraculous incidents will become commonplace. Suwa pressed his hand on the ice surface, which then cracked and split, dividing the lake in two. This was known as Suwa's famous feat, Divine Crossing. Now everyone believes it was a miracle caused by Suwa's divine power, but as observations increase, it will someday be explained as a natural phenomenon. In essence, the stronger human power becomes, the more divine power fades. When people only focus on the reality in front of them, gods and divine power will completely disappear. This is the change of eras. Although Tokiyuki didn't fully understand, he felt Suwa had suddenly become distant and couldn't help asking if he too would disappear one day. The next second, Suwa glowed, trying to tell Tokiyuki that this was the last era where invisible forces thrived, and the best era for Tokiyuki to use his abilities. He was not a deity, so he should live fully in the present. Despite this, Suwa still had to deal with the trouble he had caused. To maintain his image among his gang, Tokiyuki tied up Suwa and let the shrine maidens whip him vigorously to prove that he was the real pervert. The harvest season has arrived again. Kamakura practices double cropping. The second round of wheat planted does not require annual tribute, so the farmers are all smiling. However, the situation in another territory is entirely different. There, officials disregard the farmers' lives and seize all the food they painstakingly grew. This is all orchestrated by the Shinano provincial governor. Even Sadamune, who couldn't stand to watch, felt powerless to oppose the governor sent from Kyoto, who critiqued his poorly drawn eyebrows and corrected them himself, leaving Sadamune unable to resist. At this point, a farmer pleaded with the governor not to take all the food. The governor ordered the execution of a few as a warning to others, boasting that he could summon a large army from Kyoto with just one command. The dead farmers still clutched wheat stalks in their hands. In the same territory lives Hoshina of the Suwa deity party. Unable to tolerate the tyranny, he directly led a rebellion, but the difference in military strength was too great. The war was virtually hopeless. Suwa had no position to send reinforcements without risking a full-scale war. They wanted Tokiyuki and his men to scout the situation and ideally persuade Hoshina and his men to abandon the fight and help them escape. This time, Shizuku and Ayako did not accompany them. Several young boys endured the hardships of eating and sleeping outdoors. Kojiru also contemplated his responsibilities. He needed to protect Tokiyuki, and his actions would determine the number of casualties, so he could not retreat. Tokiyuki then began assigning tasks. Fubuki was responsible for detailed strategies, Genba helped everyone escape, and Kojiru acted independently. Upon arrival, Hoshina was already in a battle-ready state, planning to use river defenses to defend his territory. Despite the disparity in forces, Tokiyuki planned to speak with Hoshina first. The guards appeared friendly and took them directly to the camp. Tokiyuki felt a refreshing change of atmosphere until he turned around to face a group of fierce-looking men. Upon hearing they brought no reinforcements, Hoshina understood they were doomed to die as planned. It seemed they were dealing with a warrior who couldn't understand reason. His subordinates were also irritable, and Tokiyuki began to worry about his mission. The previously gentle guard was only gentle in expression and joined in the chanting with everyone else. Tokiyuki felt he definitely couldn't persuade them. Those people were already smiling, discussing how they would die. Some wanted to die standing after taking 100 arrows. Others planned to bite the enemy after losing both hands before dying. They completely treated dying like a performance at a banquet. One eerily calm warrior even wanted to be reduced to just a head, then burrow into an enemy from behind, devour the intestines, and emerge smiling through the chest before dying. This person must be out of his mind, right? However, there were still some sensible ones. Shinomiya, from the neighboring territory of Hoshina, came to help after hearing about the situation. He first verified the document Tokiyuki carried. Unsurprisingly, Suwa wanted them to cease fighting. Tokiyuki was moved to tears, finally encountering someone sensible. Shinomiya had already planned an escape route for Hoshina, suggesting abandoning the south to flee northward and build a strong defense line together. But Hoshina was too hot-headed to listen. He even asked Tokiyuki to pass a message saying he fought a battle worthy of the Suwa deity party and died gloriously. Tokiyuki ultimately couldn't persuade him. The battle was about to start, with 580 on one side and 159 on the other. Surviving the day would be a victory. Of course, Tokiyuki and his group would also help. At the command of the governor, their side launched the first attack with a volley of arrows. But soon, a smokescreen filled the riverside, making it impossible to aim, a trick by Genba. This forced the governor's side to divert manpower and time to extinguish the fire. The governor then ordered to cross the river. Fubuki directed the soldiers to open the gates and flood some of the crossing enemies. Despite the numerical disparity, another group still managed to land. Then it was Kojiru's turn to fight. Even as a child, his bravery inspired the adult soldiers. His valiant fight also gained the respect of Hoshina's party, perhaps making them more receptive to Tokiyuki's words. However, Hoshina mistook Kojiru's willingness to die with them, further exciting him. Images of his own family committing ritual suicide surfaced in Tokiyuki's mind. Unable to watch this foolish, reckless warrior any longer, he confronted him. "Do you know who Kojiru is really risking his life for? He has no interest in these ways of dying." As night was about to fall, the battle temporarily ceased. The Hoshina party had not been completely wiped out, which speaks to their bravery. However, it was a waste for them to die in vain. A soldier brought food, and a serene-faced warrior, his mouth bloody, declined to eat, claiming he was full from eating raw meat on the battlefield. Suddenly, someone shouted, "Lord Hoshina has drawn his sword on the young envoy." Fubuki and others rushed over to find Hoshina angrily pointing his sword at Tokiyuki, passionately stating his beliefs that men should sometimes die for what they must protect, such as honor and glory. Tokiyuki, just a kid, couldn't possibly understand such ideals. Brave warriors dying heroically are remembered forever. However, in reality, the Hojo clan, who mostly chose to die in battle or by suicide, are hardly praised by later generations. Most people are not interested in whether they embraced death. Tokiyuki couldn't stand this twisted logic. He grabbed a jug of wine and splashed it on Hoshina's face, dousing himself a bit as well. Hoshina immediately attacked, but fortunately, Tokiyuki's specialty was escaping. As he retreated, he argued that if they survived, they could continue to resist the oppressive governor and be a hope for the oppressed people. By dying, they would only leave behind children unable to resist. Focused solely on their own dignity, they ignored the plight of their people and dragged their followers into a selfish death. How could there be any honor in that? Besides, they weren't even good-looking. Tokiyuki's face was flushed red from drunkenness. He staggered towards Hoshina and fiercely bumped him with his bottom. Fubuki was thrilled on the side, proclaiming this a new special move only their lord could perform. Hoshina was struck repeatedly by Tokiyuki's rear. Shinomiya took the opportunity to advise that their army had barely held on today thanks to Tokiyuki's help. If they continued to fight tomorrow, they would surely be annihilated. The decision was now in Hoshina's hands. Finally sobering up, Hoshina decided to take Shinomiya's advice and retreat northward to regroup. Meanwhile, Tokiyuki had already passed out. A clear-headed Hoshina orderly instructed his subordinates to retreat under the cover of night. Elsewhere, the governor was furiously beating his own men, enraged that they hadn't completely defeated the enemy despite their superior numbers. Just then, sharp ears heard movements from across the river, indicating the enemy seemed to be retreating. This was their chance to seize the land. However, the governor scolded him as a fool, insisting they should pursue and finish off the enemy. Sharp ears, having suffered at the hands of Tokiyuki's group before, knew that their appearance usually spelled trouble, but the governor ignored the advice and insisted on a ruthless pursuit. By this time, Tokiyuki and his group were already on the run. Tokiyuki couldn't remember how he had convinced Hoshina, but he knew who he was, someone who did not want to die, unlike his clansmen. He couldn't help asking Kojiru, even if his path was so difficult, would he still accompany him? Kojiru didn't hesitate to affirm. They needed to survive together. The enemy was already in pursuit, but the two young boys spurred their horses, ready to escape to safety together.